Hi, I'm Joel Simpson.
And I'm Jennifer Ashley.
We're the directors of Two Way Street Coffee House. We're celebrating 50 years of presenting weekly concerts and community events. So we're excited to share with you this first family of folk music around here, the Stykas. So we're going to share with you a video that we recorded with them earlier where we talked with them and heard about their experiences and how they got involved with the Two-Way Street and how it extended beyond that out to Heather being an international touring artist now. So we're really excited to have her to kick off our 50th celebration.
So please stay tuned to catch more of Randy and Debbie Styka as well as Heather Styka.
And don't forget, go to the twowaystreet.org and make a donation to the coffee house. Keep us running. It's your support that keeps us going. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So today we're here with the Styka family, and we're so happy to have them. We've got Debbie and Randy and Heather, and we all know and love them. And we've known them to be volunteers and great supporters of folk music throughout the Chicago area, and even further in terms of the regional and international folk alliances.
Yes, and Heather is a amazing local artist that has a strong history in the area as well as Two-Way. And the whole family is a great big part of the Two-Way Street, so we look forward to hearing about all of that.
So we got together to have a conversation and record it and just find out more about what it was like. Maybe I'll start with Heather. What was it like being, the teenager getting dragged around to all of these folk events? And
Yeah, to some degree, I wanted no part of it.
Right. Well,
I was writing songs before I knew that folk music existed. So the songwriting happened first. And while I was writing these sort of pop piano songs, just separate from any community, they found the Two-Way Street, and we can go into that story later, but basically they went to go see Michael Smith, found out that he was in town because they both loved the Dutchman, didn't even know who he was, knew it because of Steve Goodman, and then found this whole world in the basement that is Two-Way Street, which just sort of snowballed, and I'll let them speak to that. But I started going to the high school college age open mic, the last Thursday open mic. And that part was cool to me because it was my peers. As a 13-year-old, as you might imagine, going to the other events that of a folk nature is way less cool.
can't imagine how you would feel that way.
And I don't know, it happened kind of fast where my dad was 100% in, and it would be like, what do you want to do this Friday? Two-Way Street? And it was like, I'm young. It's old. But we also found that there were, and we started going to more shows at Old Town School. There were these folk artists that spoke to my sensibility as a young, emotional human being. And that there was this crossover. So some of the traditional stuff didn't appeal right away. I always did love Celtic music. That's always actually been my love out of all of it. But yeah, there were parts that were just for them, specifically parts that were just for my dad because he's the most enthusiastic out of all of us. His patience for music going knows no bounds. And then I found sort of different, the Venn diagram of what we liked and appreciated. But it taught me how to write songs because going into it, all I ever really listened to was the pop music that a 13-year-old would get into, some punk,
Right.
whatever was on the radio, and Disney church songs. And then after finding Two-Way Street, I learned what lyrics could be. So I even at that time, I appreciated that dragging me to these folk things showed me what good lyricism could look like. So for that I'm grateful, and that was the benefit. It forced me to get out of my sort of 13-year-old mindset on love, loss, and everything being terribly dramatic, and think about songs from a little bit of a different perspective. Although, to be sure, I still write songs that are love, loss, and everything.
So, Randy and Debbie, what's your rebuttal? Is that the way you remember
and
it?
your corrections, yeah, I know.
Right.
So you had to keep her out of trouble, so you brought her out every Friday.
Exactly. To try to, your ears were bleeding from the punk music she was forcing you to listen to, so you had to show her. Yeah. So how did you find 2A? Let's start with that.
She's right about Michael Smith. I think that was our first show there. And when we heard that he was going to be at this place, we're like, wow, that's, pretty big name to be at Two-Way Street. And he joked about it actually when he performed, like he was joking about all the money he was going to make there that night and everything.
Back then the ticket price was $3, and multiply $3 times a
30.
full standing room only. No, it was packed. People were in the hallway.
Yeah.
But still, times $3.
Yeah.
He must have made $30, $40 now. So yeah, very exciting.
So, but your first volunteering experience, or did you
Well,
came
I think
asked first?
I don't know if Heather will remember, but I think when she started going to open mics, I think I started to maybe volunteer to come to some of those open mics to help.
Okay.
I know it was, they didn't want old people there in the audience of that.
Yeah,
But
You're talking about last Thursday.
I mean, last Thursday.
They were volunteering for the last Thursday. I mean, that was what was cool about it, was that last Thursday wasn't for them or any parents. But there were always volunteers running it, so I think she probably got involved so that she could see me play.
Well, and part of that,
Way to go, Mom.
back then was that you weren't old enough to drive, because you were actually started going when you were in 8th grade. You weren't officially in high school.
Wow.
And so we'd have to drive you there, and a few times we dropped you off and went to dinner and picked you up.
Yeah, I don't know where you guys went. I was because a lot of times you would drop me off. Like,
It's called Ballydoyle.
I know, Ballydoyle.
Wow. But
That's
so
amazing.
you started volunteering for last Thursday, and
then from there I said, well, we go to these shows, might as well volunteer once in a while, let's get started doing that. And then eventually Randy did some more later with the microphones.
Well, yeah, when because for so many years Jean was doing sound at every show, and when she retired from doing sound, they needed people to do it, and I'm like, I can do that. I'd done that back in high school and college and stuff anyway, and I know enough about sound to help out with that. But a lot of it is pretty organic. I mean, the same thing. I volunteered for a lot of shows at the Old Town School, and it was pretty much that there's the program, they need help, and I also know I'm spending a ton of money on concerts. Gee, I can volunteer and see the same show and help people out.
yeah.
But it kind of grew from that. Old Town and 2A, and we used to volunteer at Stained Glass Coffee House when that was going on. Each of those is a real community, and that's something I think as volunteers people don't expect that going into it. That more than the helping, it's the community of an Old Town School, of a 2A Street volunteers, whatever. That's a huge part of it, and that's one of the great things about the music in the community and Chicago area for sure.
We should talk about Acoustic Renaissance.
Yeah. Tell us about Acoustic Renaissance.
Well, Acoustic Renaissance Concerts has been going on for 26 years now, I guess. I'm the third person to be officially director, but what happened was the original people, Dan had started it. He moved to the East Coast. Susan took over and ran it for many years. And we knew each other, and I was at a farm conference, which is a Folk Alliance Region Midwest. And Susan was going to be moving to Ohio, and she's like, is there some volunteer that wants to take over all the work of, doing this series? And I'm like, no one's raising their hand. Okay, another volunteer job. And in a very short time, Debbie was like, well, I can help with that. And so, she's a big part of booking and handling the ticket sales and everything else. So the beauty of it is because it has gone on so long, clearly not as long as Two-Way Street, but we have a very reliable audience. People trust that maybe they will only know half of the artists, but they like those artists, so they're going to come to the other shows also. And so it's really an honor to being able to curate a series like that after all these years. So, and it's a similar kind of thing to Two-Way, because we have volunteers that are a big part of selling the merch and helping with sound and every little bit. And that's like the same thing, whether it's Acoustic Renaissance or Two-Way or Old Town School, whatever. It's all based on volunteers, certainly.
I think of one of the last times that I was at Acoustic Renaissance as an audience member. It was to see Heather, and I was thinking as you were speaking about that, one of the volunteers that I've gotten to know, Ken, over there, and, like literally saw him at the show Saturday, and then like the next week or something saw him volunteering at folk festival for WDCB with Larry,
he helps
or
really
like
a lot.
These kinds of things. And it's so funny to see all of, like we said, those people that are intertwined with the different organizations, and
and really the paramount is because it's the volunteers that really make it go at the end of the day. The volunteers who love and support all of these fantastic artists that come through.
So I have a question for Heather. What was it like to perform at Acoustic Renaissance? Because that's like crossing a new threshold or a new milestone.
I don't know, maybe. I honestly, well, what's weird about Acoustic Ren is that they got involved like long after I had been moved out touring on my own, probably for 5 years already, when they got involved. And the reason that my dad started booking it was because back in the day, he would be my chaperone to a folk conference, because I was like 17, 18, and needed someone to like take me. So he didn't start like looking to get involved in that way. It was more that he just really enjoyed volunteering at the conferences, and then by the time he would go every year, fell in love with that community, and then knew enough people like to be the right person to do booking, because he was already familiar with so many of these artists, some of them on a personal level. But for me, it's been like a totally sort of separate little track, and I love that venue, but it's really not mine at all. In fact, there's, I'll have people who are like, so what's the deal about getting in at ARC? And I'm like, well, I can't sell out that room. I mean, that's a reality that you have to face in any market. Like, I've opened at similar spaces across the country, like similar sized concert series, and it's really just like a numbers game. From a touring standpoint, it always is like, who can you bring in? And if you can't in that region, then who can you pair it with? And I hear them having those conversations. I feel like my little like view into the ARC situation is being able to, they understand the needs of the artist, because their daughter makes a living playing folk music. So
we like to treat the artists
really
kindly.
there's a certain like innate respect there, and I think maybe a little more understanding of like the little things that an artist appreciates, like giving them some space or like good green room snacks. I mean, a little goes a long way if you're traveling.
Snacks are key.
Snacks are when someone's listened to like what you need and is willing to work with you, that makes a big difference. So I'm mostly proud that like not every folk concert series that I've played has been the best experience. I mean, that's just life. Like, a lot of them are beautiful communities with beautiful people running it, and sometimes it's kind of a hard night due to whatever circumstances. But it's nice knowing that my parents are out there like putting that into the world, because I'm like the recipient of that kind of gracious treatment so much as I tour. I'm always so grateful for these volunteers who allow me to do this for a living. And then I know like back home, that's what they're doing. So yeah, it was to get to play ARC was exciting. Not so, maybe not so much the venue, because like similar venues are in my life. I guess Old Town School was really the big, like the times when I've played Old Town School, that was the stage that I grew up like longing to be on.
Nice.
And getting to do that and opening for Peter Himmelman was someone
Nice.
that I grew up listening to a ton.
Wow.
My mom was a super fan, and I mean, that was one of like maybe like 5 cassettes that I remember being in the car all the time.
Right.
And just loving his songs before I
She
knew
said
what
cassettes.
these were. So opening for him, that was probably opening for him, and then like playing in the round with Michael Smith and Mark Dvorak over at Fitzgerald's. Those were probably the peak kind of like in the terms of Chicago area, being like, I did the thing that I grew up wanting to do. So those were some big highlights.
With the help of your family and the support of our community, like the folk
right?
community. That's
And
also you've been showcasing at different times for folk conferences. Did you had one at one point for the national one year, didn't you?
Yeah, I've done
And you did Farm and
I've
NERFA
done
and
Farm, NERFA,
all of the
Swerve.
above. Yeah.
They all rhyme.
Yeah.
So, Debbie and Randy, could you speak to her first performance at Two-Way Street? No, be quiet, Heather. Was she nervous? Was it like, did it go well?
and
Did she
can
like
we
storm
and
out?
what-
Like,
remind us how old you were, like when you had your first official booking at 2A, if you remember.
How do you recall it, Heather, as far as your age?
Yeah, I was gonna say they probably don't actually know the answer on this.
I should have looked
we
that
can
up.
look. I will have to find out.
I could figure it out because I was shortly thereafter dated the person because it was a co-bill.
It was gonna say it was a co-bill. It was a rare co-bill, and that was because
Called
Dave wasn't sure.
Jonathan's Axel.
Oh. What'd
I
you
don't
call
know
me?
that it was a duo, and then I think it was a duo, unless it was a trio. It was a duo, and then I ended up like right around that time dating one of those band members. I don't know if I started dating him before I did the show or at that same time. At the Two-Way Street, the last Thursday, people were always sort of coupling up, and Dave was big on like finding out the gossip. I think also probably secretly wanted to facilitate that.
You heard it here first, folks. We'll have to follow up on that
I
with
know,
Tim
right?
Kendall
We're
and
gonna be
Ruth.
like, so word on the street has it. Yeah.
He's a matchmaker too.
Knows everything, he's just like, he kind of knows everything that goes on in people's lives, and it's not that he like wants to spread the
Not
gossip.
nosy, but
I think
yeah.
it's more that he wanted to was like, well, clearly these people are hanging out a lot, whatever that looks like, so it seemed like a good fit for a co-bill. But putting the pressure of being a solo act and that kind of draw would have been hard for the first show. And I'd already been playing out. My mom actually did this in the start, before I could even like book stuff via email, when I was actually 13 years old. My mom was the one who called up the local coffee shop in Addison,
Espresso cup.
Okay.
And sometimes she would like advocate on my behalf without telling me. Like I found out like 11 years after the fact that I was on Car Talk. I mean, I did not want some of the things.
Click and clack, like the car talk. Wow.
Yeah, one of the songs got on there and I didn't know about it. I didn't know that she'd submitted it. I didn't find out until much later.
That takes you up to a whole new level for me. Like,
Well,
around-
moms get to do that, right? We
Car
get
talk.
to advocate on Our children's behalves.
So a lot of times well, my dad is so wrapped up in like booking and the world of Old Town School and the world of ARC that he goes to a conference, leaves me alone, and kind of forgets that I exist. We like run into each other in the halls, and it's like, oh, hey, we're related. But
Right.
my mom is always like secretly plotting, like, what would help Heather, and she'll like tell me ideas and like, don't do it, whatever you do, like, let me handle it. Please don't call anyone. But she hasn't done that since I was like 14. But Dave reached out to me about the first Two-Way Street gig. I'd been a regular at the last Thursday for probably 7. I started going at 13, and that show what I would have been 17. So for like 4 years of consistently going every month, then I was ready.
Yeah.
I think you are one of the first people, they've at that point didn't do a lot of have somebody at Thursday night for the last Thursday and then book them on a Friday night.
Sure.
So I think you and the Jonathan's Axel was kind of let's see how this goes. So
Yeah.
Trying it out. That was the idea.
Yeah. And will our regular audience come, and what kind of crowd will we get, the whole thing. So it was kind of an experiment a little bit.
So how did it work out?
Well, I think, probably each family probably brought it, if there was 2 or 3 artists in Jonathan's Axel, they probably brought out their family and then friends. And so I think it's pretty decent crowd. And
It was, yeah.
from there, I think, Dave, they had the festival that was
the
Downers Grove.
Heritage Fest.
Right.
Heritage Festival.
Heritage. He booked you guys after that same year, I think in the summertime for that.
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so they did a couple of songs on that stage.
For many years, there was a stage set up literally behind the coffee house. It was before the band shell was there. And I remember, and that was like an all-day thing, like, I don't know, 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. or something. And you played that a few times over the years, yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
that happened almost, I wouldn't say every year, but like every couple of years. And I think that was really the space where I felt like a part of the broader Two-Way Street community. Because like when you play a Friday night, you don't see any other artists. And when I played the last Thursday, all you see would be the younger generation. But the Friday night quarterly adult open mics and that once a year Heritage Fest was where it was like I'd run into other performers who were grown adults and they would cheer me on, and
Right.
it was like, oh, okay, cool, I can hang with these people. Yeah.
I remember you met someone. I remember it just came back to me that Rich Pezzioso broke a string on a guitar, and you loaned him your guitar, and he's such an amazing guitarist. And you're like, afterwards, you're like, Rich played my guitar. So,
I don't remember that. What I do remember, that guitar, I guess, got a lot of more fame than either of the guitars that I still use. Like this, like cheap little Art and Luthery $200 guitar. I was playing it at the open mics at Uncommon Ground here in the city. I used to go to that every Monday and worked there for a while as a sound engineer. So that was like a big part of my community here. And some people that I knew from last Thursday, I would run into them in the city and be like, oh, so you also have moved to the city from the suburbs and are still playing folk music, just in a different context. But at one of those early on, I was probably 19, 18. Once the Frames, Glenn Hansard came in.
Oh, yeah.
Just like
Falling slowly, huh?
happened to be there and needed a guitar. And like I was a big fan of his on like a global level, and then he played my guitar. And
He's managers in Chicago, so he's always coming through here a bunch.
I didn't catch what you said.
I said his manager is in Chicago.
Ah,
So that's why he's always coming through here. Plus, there's a big Irish community, as we all know, right? Like so. But
Okay, so we've talked about a couple different contexts in which you've played in the folk community and Two-Way Street specifically. Does any one specific performance for you, Heather, really stand out at the Two-Way as being like really special? Because you've performed there a lot, over the years, but is there one?
you know what? Can I add to that? Because my question actually ties in where you've toured now internationally. So like to go out to the outer world
Right.
and come back and see the Two-Way Street, it has to be like an old sweater, like, but just that warm place that all these shows and all these people and, nearly 2,500 shows in this room and that energy and like, yeah.
So tell us about if anything stands out.
It's funny now when I play Two-Way to think that there was a time when it was really scary to play there. Like I do remember, I never really get like stage fright per se. I don't have like a nerves thing. But most of my anxiety is always around whether or not people will show up, and that remains true to this day. No problem going out on stage and performing for people, but will there be people? That's the question. So you're terrified for that for weeks coming up to something and hoping that you've done all the promotion and hoping that there isn't some crazy conflicting event that takes away your entire audience and you feel embarrassed because it's empty. Like that, there's always that. But Two-Way Street, I never really had to worry about filling the room because it's a nice, small, cozy room. So most of my nerves were always just like, you could feel it in your stomach. I mean, that first time I remember how I felt genuinely anxious, which I don't really feel too much anymore, except in like totally new contexts. But yeah, so now going back to Two-Way, it's playing similar rooms across the country, playing much, much, much scarier, larger, more intense rooms. It doesn't feel, there's no anxiety playing Two-Way now because it's really just like going to see friends. Like I know that I'm gonna know the people there. If anything, that my fear is that I'll run into someone who I've known for the past decade and forget their name, which of course happens to us all. That's the only fear at Two-Way Street, is that I'll forget the name of an old friend. But I guess the time that I remember the most out of all the different performances there, a couple times now I've had like my album release in the city or an album release tour, and then there's the Two-Way Street album release. Like I always have that as a separate thing. And when a new record comes out and I look out and I see a room of people who own every record I've put out and are getting the new one, and they're like ready for it and want to hear the new songs and see where I'm going and have tracked my development since I was 13, that's a pretty special feeling. I think that's the thing that separates it from every other venue, because I do have places that I have like a long-standing relationship with, and certainly I feel like a close tie to Old Town. But Two-Way Street is the only place on the planet where you can say they really knew me when. and to have everyone still coming to shows and showing up and supporting the new stuff. And you could just feel like this like sense of pride. It's like family. Yeah. So album releases, I couldn't say one in particular, but that's always a good feeling at Two-Way.
Wow.
So now, Randy, are you still involved with the board of Farm or Folk Alliance?
Yeah, and it's I'll probably back up a little bit, but something that Heather said earlier. I started going to Farm as her chaperone. nothing is ever planned. I never planned on getting this involved with the music, but I started as a chaperone, ended up in, hey, I love this late night stuff. We're hanging out till 2 a.m, drinking beer and swapping songs. This is great. So get sucked into that, end up doing more and more of that, then get sucked into volunteering at the Old Town School and become in charge of a group of people and coordinating events and just all kinds of things.
Dad, did you get involved with that because you were like filling in for me or something?
I was filling in for you. Yeah, you were thinking you were in the city.
Your fault, Heather. All of this.
You were going to volunteer at Old Town, and you couldn't go to the orientation, and it was required orientation. And I went in your place, and I signed up as you, and the lady who's long gone, who was conducting it, said, "So what about you volunteering?" Well, I'm really just here to fill out the paperwork for Heather, but you should fill one out too. Okay, I did. In no time, I volunteered for literally thousands of shows, and you've done some, but I mean,
a dozen. I mean, really, like. I'm pretty busy. At the time, I was a broke college student who just wanted to get into shows for free. So right. I used a lot more then. But now that I'm playing shows, I have less time to go to shows, alas. But yeah, it was both instances of your hyper involvement in folk were accidental, like, favors that you did for me that turned into lifelong obsession.
That's exactly right. Because Old Town, I end up, as a head volunteer at Farm. I go to the conferences year after year, and suddenly they're really short on board members. And I don't know how many years ago, I've been on the board a long time, but they were like, we really need somebody on the board. And back then, we really didn't do an election. It was, officially there was an election, but if they only had 2 slots to fill and they asked 2 people and they both said yes, they're like, okay, acclamation.
Exactly. Everybody say aye.
Yeah. I think you have like 1 more year.
Yeah. So we instituted term limits some years ago. So I've certainly been on the board longer than anyone at this point. Oh, okay. But my term will be up in a year, October 2021. It's been great. And we had a board meeting yesterday, actually, virtually, and they're like, but you're going to keep coming and do the late night hall monitor and stay up all night. I'm, well, sure, I'll keep doing that. And they're like, because you have to do that. We need somebody to do that. I'm sure.
I feel like last Farm, I found Heather in the hall because you had fallen asleep in one of the jam rooms, and I was a little concerned. I wasn't sure if we should like make sure you make your way back to your hotel or not. So I went to find Heather. She's like, no, he's okay. Just leave him there.
She knows better.
And I mean, you were just tired, I'm sure, because it was probably 2 or 3 in the morning. But who wouldn't turn down like watching Ordinary Elephant and like all the other big acts or whatever, just sitting around jamming at the end of the night, like
right.
And it was pretty cool. So thank you, Debbie. Thank you, Randy, for taking the time to talk about this. Heather, thank you for kicking off our 50th anniversary. Yes. This is a great celebration.
Cannot think of a better person to represent that decade, because you graced the stage and have had such success as a local artist that, like you said, everybody's anticipating what your next move is. So we certainly appreciate you being part of our celebration, and honestly, like the first person that we thought of.
Yes.
For real. Because I'm a big fan, and as like a person who's new to performing and the folk, I don't have quite the history that Joel has, so I, by hook or crook, somehow found myself here, and I, cannot be more excited to be part of such a community of wonderful people. So what is it like as parents to see your daughter, who has grown from her very first performance at 2A as a co-bill to a touring artist with great success? So, I mean, obviously you're proud, but what did,
This one to my mom, I feel like she's probably mostly terrified, but.
Boy, that's a hard question, because it's you're doing it over time.
And one thing, that just comes to mind right away to me is, as a parent, and I think this is true for any parent, however young you were, wow, that is an amazing song. Wow.
Yeah.
You, as your parent, you're just like, this is great. This is great. Doesn't everybody love this song? When you look back 10, 20 years later, and I'm like, well, okay, maybe it wasn't. But I mean, as a parent, everything is perfect. It's just like your child's first drawing on the refrigerator, or whatever. When you look back later and hear, newer songs, or like the newest CD, like North, I'm like, these are some amazing songs.
Yeah.
And you realize how far she's come, but going through it over time, you don't notice that. I mean, you don't notice people growing up because it's all gradual, and the quality of the writing and that, I mean, she's always done so well, but we have the pride in it, but she's also gotten better.
I always tell people I'm glad that they told me I was good when I wasn't, because otherwise I wouldn't be here. Like, you need someone to tell you that you're good, even if you're not really that great. Like, that's fledgling artist thing.
I feel like
age or whatever. I don't know. I mean,
I feel like the two-way street's been like that too, with the open mics and the last Thursday. That atmosphere of always being welcoming and
supportive,
supportive of anybody. And I feel that same way. Where like there's some chances I got that I shouldn't have along the way or whatever. But I'm glad that people gave me those chances, because it makes you feel believed in and like worth going on another time. But I see what you're saying though, Randy, like probably that new threshold of actually looking at a song and being like, wow, this is really art, and like, it supersedes that the original, like, just, oh, she wrote a song, where now it's reached artistic level, and you're just like, wow, that's my daughter. Like, I bet that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So thank you to the Styka family.
Okay,
Sorry
you're
if that took a
welcome.
little longer than
Thank you
I thought.
guys.
Yeah, no, you guys
for
really
taking in